10x your service design offering with Smapply. Take 20% off any order with This Is HCD 20 off. Let's superpower you and your design team's potential. Sign up at smapply.app. Enjoy the episode from your friends at Smapply, helping support This Is HCD podcast.
Welcome to Worldwide Waste, a podcast about how digital is killing the planet and what to do about it. Chris Coyier is a web designer and developer who built CSS Tricks, a website all about building websites that's been going strong for more than 10 years. He's a co-founder of CodePen, a playground for front-end web development. Along with Dave Rupert, another brilliant designer, he's the co-host of a podcast called Shop Talk, a show about building websites. Chris is a brilliant all-round guy and just a really nice person. Chris is worried that the web is going in the wrong direction. Too big, too slow, too complicated, too much stuff. A disconnect between the people who make websites and the people who use them. He's shocked at just how big websites have become.
It's a huge problem. It's a huge problem. I mean, 10x, you're saying that over, a decade and a half of size of websites. Okay, that's bad. It's bad because it's slowing down that metric. It would be interesting to see what those seconds for desktop and mobile were 15 years ago. I mean, we wouldn't have a mobile number because that wasn't really a thing then. But is that getting slower too? It probably is. Yeah.
I think it is. I saw some studies. Back in 2013 where it was about 3 or 4 seconds or 5 seconds in that sort of territory. So the data that I'm seeing, Chris, is that even with the increased bandwidth, that years ago it was better.
Right. Things get worse with time. I think of a funny one. I like when I used to change the channel as a kid on my TV. You'd change this knob, and I'm 40 about, so it's things changed over time. But there used to be some old TVs you change the knob and you just change it, and instantaneously the channel would change. And that now we have these cable boxes and stuff. I watch my parents try to change the channel. It takes like 4 seconds to change the channel. I know we're talking about the web, but I'm like, why did that get slower over time? That's so weird.
Exactly. I mean, that's a great point. That really annoys me, like when I'm in hotels or whatever. And like digitally changing the channel is a pain in the ass, like I think.
Isn't stuff supposed to get better?
Like, how did this? Yeah. Exactly.
So that is happening, and it's a problem. And so one way to approach that, which I think, I've heard stats like this over and over. You have too, because we go to a lot of the same conferences, and there'll be a talk, including your own, but some people just talk specifically about web performance. They all open like this, they open with statistics about how bad it's gotten. And so there's a lot of evangelism happening there. There's more tooling, there's more people talking about it, there's more consultants in the area, yada, yada. People are trying to tackle it. And it's not working. Overall, it's not working. And the story is the same for accessibility, too. It's like lots of people talking about it. We know it's a big problem. And yet, as you measure it, it gets worse over time. And so that's such a sucky problem that it feels a little overwhelming. It feels a little bit like the virus does. Like I feel helpless. I can't do anything.
And why? What is the forces? Because there's all these forces at play. What's this inexorable force that's pushing it bigger all the time, or set of forces?
I hear this one too. I can't link you to a study or anything, but I bet you've heard it too. It reminds me about, here's two of them. One of them is like football players, like the United States kind of football, where they wear the big pads and the oblong ball, and pass and run and stuff. They wear big, thick, heavy pads and helmets, and they smash into each other and try to move the ball. And safety is a big concern and a big topic around that. And they say that if you build a better helmet, which they try to do to reduce concussions and keep players safe and all that, the end result sometimes is the players just smash into each other harder. You've given them this equipment and you're trying to solve it with technology, but the end result isn't really working because they just have better equipment, so they smash into each other. I also think of like car safety, whereas like an old car and the invention of cars, they went 15 miles an hour. And they were still dangerous because, I don't know, you'd go flying out of it, or the thing wasn't built for safety like they are now. Fast forward to now, we have cars that are much, much safer, and seatbelts and airbags and all this stuff, but we drive 85 miles an hour. So the danger is still there. So it's like we improve the technology and then we just get more reckless with the technology. So it's just, that's the force at work.
If web designers design kit for professional footballers, right? They'd get on the pitch and they wouldn't be able to run. Right. Because if you think that performance is so critical, right? In the experience, the linebacker would try to run and he'd be so weighed down with crap that he'd be running at half the speed he's been running at 4 years ago. And like if web designers design cars, right, you'd put the pedal to the metal and you'd go at 40 miles an hour max speed. We think we're designing Ferraris. We're designing Ferraris, but we're designing tractors. When you actually look at the essentiality, we know that performance from customers from a use point of view is critical. This is not you can argue one way about accessibility. Oh, nobody really cares about accessibility because they're just, that's only a tiny fraction of the audience. So you can see the Machiavellian logic at play for accessibility, but it's like a Dumbo logic for performance for everyone else. It's not as if you're improving. You're actually making the thing worse.
Yeah. Just to speak to forces a little bit, I think we've probably heard this over and over again, but I'm just going to say it again. It's that when you're a developer and you're building something, that you build it with the tools that you happen to have in front of you at the moment. And tons of web developers are just doing well in the economy right now. I am doing just fine. I have a MacBook Pro. It cost me many thousands of dollars. I sit here in my office. It's a pretty nice little office. In fact, I'm recording this in a sound booth, which surely not most people have. It's just an advantage that I have. And I have really fast internet. In fact, we ordered some business grade internet for this office, which is surely much more than average people pay for this. So I have an amazing computer with amazing internet, and I use a desktop browser on my machine. And if I just didn't care about performance, I could build websites that are tremendously heavy and tremendously full of bandwidth sucking things. And my experience as I build it is fine. I can't even tell the difference. And I'm just not thinking about the rest of the world or people that use different devices or have different bandwidth considerations. I mean, I can go to the website unsplash.com. It's a great resource. Nothing against Unsplash. It's really neat. They have free stock photography for all kinds of stuff. I can look up dog on Unsplash and have wonderful pictures of dogs that I can just download and use even commercially. And if I just hit that download button, I'll get a picture of a dog. And the dog is, this one I just grabbed is 1.6 megabytes. So I'm sure there's lots of developers in the world that then take that picture of a dog and they just put it somewhere on their website. And now they have a picture of a dog there. That's 1.6 megabytes. It's massive, and think of all the electricity and all that. So I know you care about stuff like, or that's kind of the part of what's happening in your Worldwide Waste book, right? It's talking about the waste of bandwidth and electricity that goes with that. But look how easy it was for me to do. I think that's when you're talking about forces at work, it's because it's so easy to build in a high consumption way. It's so easy to grab high resolution images off your camera. It's so easy to NPM install huge libraries and just use them. The developer ergonomics for using huge resource is so easy that people just do it.
I just had a call with a senior person in Toyota about these broad subjects because they've really began to address this problem. And she was telling me about how, over the years they've been talking about, they're obsessed with quality, and reliability. That's a kind of the Toyota way, so to speak, Kaizen and all that sort of stuff. And said in the early days of the web, there was a kind of a view that the web was not Toyota. The website was not really, because it was so new, the whole digital team, and, there was not really Toyota. So if you understand what I'm kind of trying to get at, that, that's the web, that's not all cars. And, we are obsessive about quality when it comes to our cars, but when it comes to the web, what is quality? That question they began to ask after a period of time. And it says, well, what is quality? We are obsessed with quality when it comes to cars, but what is quality when it comes to the web? And it took them years of discussing and everything like that. And finally, they actually realized that part of quality is the experience that the person has, downloading the page, not just downloading the page, whether there's an error, whether there's broken links, whether there's. So now they've created a whole internal system that if something happens on the website, it triggers a whole set of processes that become management decisions, that it tracks back what agency created the code, it sends a message out to them. And all of this stuff needs to be actioned within days, sometimes within hours. Wow. Like I was giving an evening presentation with Toyota about 6 months ago, and we had finished the presentation. We're sitting down having a meal, and this senior executive got a call, and she got up and she had to go away, and she said, and then she came back and she said, sorry about that, I just had to deal with something. I said, what was it about? She said, one of the websites, there was a problem with one of the websites, that there's an SMS messaging system that if there's delays or problems, senior executives get messages at night.
What?
And that was what I was saying. What? You do that?
So Toyota, the very creators of Kaizen, or the philosophy behind all this, they're taking that to the web too, you're saying?
They're taking it to web. But you know what they've done, which is super genius, I think? They have in their headquarters this big orb, like a UFO, right? That they call Simon, from some game. I don't remember the game, but it was seemingly a very popular game, maybe in their European headquarters are in Belgium. And it's connected to the metric system, particularly download speeds and bugs and errors. And if everything is going great, this big orb is white, like it's lit up, so it's white. Mm-hmm. But if problems start to occur in the environment, it starts going different colors. So now everyone's aware, because it's an open plan, a kind of building, an office, and people walking down the corridor can see, Simon is going red. So they've a kind of externalized the sense of the pain of the customer. They've colorized the experience of the customer, and a kind of brought that set of colors into the headquarters so that people can kind of touch the. I'm not. You see what? Isn't that an amazing idea?
Yeah, it becomes like water cooler talk. Even if you're not directly involved in the product, if you see a light on the ceiling the wrong color, you might be like, that becomes the conversation. What's wrong?
But is there something, Chris? Because you're a developer, a thinker. Mm-hmm. Is there something that you could begin to think about that could somehow, in your wonderful, amazing environment with, amazing bandwidth, that at the same time when you're developing, there's these red lights go on, or how can we design into the development process? Maybe first it's a management issue to establish quality, but somehow that makes the developer feel a bit the experience that they're developing, or somehow gives them triggers? Or have you seen anything? Have you anything that triggers or brainstorms?
Yeah, not this good, but I'll say that I think the technology is there to enable this. So I think of things like performance budgets is one of them, which is, we allocate these metrics are what's important for this website. And, websites these days are constantly evolved. A big website of pretty much any scale is probably pushed to many times a day. That's just kind of how websites are built these days. And there's all kinds of processes in place to watch them. For example, developers write tests for their website that, there's this JavaScript function and we're going to give it X, Y, and we expect back Y, Z. And if it doesn't pass that, the code isn't allowed to go to the website. So that's long been established already. This website better pass these tests, otherwise alarms go off. But the alarms that go off are often pretty benign. They're like a Slack channel gets pinged or an email gets generated or something. But still, the technology's there. What that could power instead is the lights changing color in an office or something, test failing. But that's just tests. There's also this, like the performance budgets I mentioned. That's a form of a test. It spins up the website. It gets some performance metrics from that website. And it's essentially failing a test if the metrics go over those bars. It takes too long to load, seconds-wise, or it goes over a kilobyte limit or something. That's akin to failing a test. And there's more that can get piled on this too. There's accessibility testing. That can be automated, at least to some degree. Run this website through accessibility tests. And if it fails, that's akin to failing a test. And I want Simon to change colors on the ceiling when that type of thing happens. So I think that the technology is ready for it. It's just what we do with it. It's like taking those essentially failed tests more seriously and expanding them culturally in an organization,
Yeah, and I'm thinking of what you said earlier, because I've thought about these sorts of things a lot, or at least tried to think about them, and kind of, the great computer, etc. And that you kind of design, or I'm not saying you, but it's easy to design, for what you have. But let's say we were designing bicycles, or we were designing windows, we'd have to design a window that fit into the guy's house or the woman's house. We'd have to design a bicycle that people can actually ride. What is missing? Like, there's these constraints. Like, when you're designing a car, it has to meet safety standards. It has to. You have to be able to get into it. You have to. There's certain things that just have to work. Yet on the web, it seems you can design. Like, I saw this environment, and they had a great intent, but they were designing this sort of service to help recent immigrants. I think it was around the time of the Syrian war that were coming to Europe, and they designed it with such a heavy JavaScript that the immigrants had smartphones, but they were really cheap. They couldn't use it because all the smartphones that they did have were just really cheap, older versions of phones. So practically nobody that was actually supposed to be able to use it could use it. And these people had been trying to do something good. But, what is it that there's a constraint for a bicycle? There's a constraint for a car. There's a constraint for a window. But there doesn't seem to be a basic set of constraints for a website.
Yeah, right. Well, you'd know if you had a bicycle shop, right? You're trying to sell a bicycle, and if you forgot to put a seat on it, somebody at the bicycle salesman is going to be like, look, nobody's buying the bike. You can't sit on it. There's a very direct line there. With a website, you just ship it and you hope, and so you're not face to face with somebody, which is missing a little bit. But that's really interesting stuff. I talked about the failing of tests. That kind of happens before you ship a website, theoretically, but there should be the same kind of test after it goes out, which is probably what you're getting at here a little bit.
Yeah, but it's Yeah, and well, it's like this, Chris. The test says you don't have a saddle, and it still ships. You're like, like the test comes back, no saddle on bicycle. Yeah, ship. like, it's like, yeah, it's strange, isn't it? We're in this. Is it part of digital that we're just in this surreal world where we're disconnected from the use of the things that we create?
Yeah, that's it, isn't it? That's the danger, perhaps. Or sometimes it's more insidious than that. Like, hey, it didn't work for somebody who had a low-powered phone, but it's easy to justify that away. Even if you know that information, you can just be like, they're probably poor then, so they're not going to upgrade on my service anyway. So, it's easy to just not care. Like it.
To that. But I've found it, Chris, in areas where you're trying to sell to poor people. Like I
right.
found it,
You're trying to.
Like, I mean, you can say that guy's an asshole. Okay, but that guy's a logical asshole. But we've got illogical assholes. We've got people who are, making an experience for people they need. That's horrible. It's not even.
Yeah. That is incredible, right? It's shipping a bicycle without a saddle. You're like, How did you even manage to do that? Unbelievable. I don't know that I have any answers to that, but it is rather unbelievable, isn't it?
And maybe it is, like, as you were saying, Chris, the experience, or that what I was talking about, that we do. How do we bring the tactile experience more into the design process? Of you can feel when you're designing the window, you feel that window, you're looking at it and you're saying, hey, that's not gonna fit. Like that window's that window looks weird. You just know that window's not going to fit into that house, or and we've lost digital kind of. It's like the coronavirus. It takes away our ability to smell and to touch. We're a kind of, are we in a way disabled as human beings, as digital designers?
Yeah, that's it's a powerful thought, really. I mean, so some of it is like, well, it's early, like the web's a couple decades old, maybe. So maybe some of this stuff will shake out. Like the technology will evolve such that it gets better and we stop making these stupid mistakes. But I'm not so sure. It seems like these are fundamental problems with the fact that we're not face to face with our customers. So what do you do in a situation where you're not face to face with your customers? How do you make sure of that stuff? And my mind keeps going to automated solutions. Maybe testing gets better, maybe monitoring gets better, maybe there's a way that I can take a top task and ensure that some percentage of people are accomplishing it. And if I can't, then that sends off alarms if people aren't doing it. So I know that the thing I built continues to do the thing that I sent it to do. But I don't know how. I don't know that that's always possible, or it's not really straightforward. It's not as simple as a person standing at the end of a row with a clipboard saying, does it have a saddle or not? It's just harder than that as a problem, sadly.
And maybe absolutely automated, but maybe part of it is Chris, I remember Tomer Sharon telling me he used to be a senior researcher, user experience guy in Google years ago, and they would have a Fridays, a customer Fridays, I think they called it. Once a month, they'd bring a bunch of developers out, and they'd visit small businesses, and just watch how they searched. And that we, even in the best automated systems, we still need a little bit of tactile immersion in the world. Somehow bring in, like the Canadian government web team, every evening they test about 12 coronavirus tasks. So can you find the symptoms for, how much benefit you're this person, how much benefit do you qualify for? Just also a kind of top tasky type of stuff. Every evening, they're practically every evening they're testing. So we're giving these, now it's semi-automated. They're not doing, it's not live, but it's that a kind of usertesting.com type of stuff. So, but they look at the videos the next day, they analyze them, and then they say, oh, that didn't work, or change that content. They can't, oh, look, they can't find, and then they initiate a series of changes the next day. And they're constantly evolving their content and their architecture based on this constant feedback. And they also get feedback in from the call center saying, oh, they're big stuff about masks now, masks. We've seen a big uptake on calls about, so they've modeled this constant. I think you really need that, like that, for all the wonderful stuff. You can't beat just a little bit of immersion into the world of use.
I think of, not to make this an ad for any particular product, but I have a little bit of experience with this product called Full Story, and it's an analytics kind of platform, but the way that it records the data for you to look at, it's a little, as you mentioned, user testing. It's a little bit like that, except for you're not like looking at the person's face. You're just watching them use the website, but it doesn't record just a handful of people. It records literally everyone that uses your website. And you have to be, careful to anonymize it and such to make sure that, you're handling the privacy stuff okay. But you can literally sit there and watch people use your website every single session of somebody that uses your website. And then from there, you start to scope down what they're doing. So you're like, I don't want to look at everybody who's using the website. I only want people that are at this URL, or first went to this URL and then went to this URL, or searched for this term, or clicked this button. And then you scope down into these segments, certain people that are using your website. And it gives you a lot of insight into what people are actually doing on a website. And the crux of it is that it records everything, so that, you just know more. And so you can start to look at that stuff. And then you can set up kind of alerts type of stuff. Like, what if this segment of users drops 25% overnight? Oh, I want to know that because that's an important segment of users. So that just as a tech guy, I think my mind goes to stuff like that. I don't know if it's always a automated solution that goes to that, but it's worth a look. I think sometimes I think automation can be helpful.
Well, maybe changing tack a little bit, but not entirely. But the stuff that I've been really focused on the last 12 months around, worldwide waste, and this concept I'm trying to explore about the Earth experience, that digital has a weight. People say, oh, conferencing is much better than driving to a meeting. There's no question. But when you are conferencing in super high HD and you're doing it on, two big 72-inch screens in a room, and you're doing it all day long, and you're storing the videos in the cloud, and, it's still not as much as, driving 30 or 40 miles, but it begins to build up. And when there's 50 people on the call, but what it is it's not zero. Like, it's not, you are creating some pollution. Like, I used to think for years, I don't really create any pollution. I work in digital. But, we've created 10 billion smartphones since 2007. Mm-hmm. The physical e-waste is
big number,
50 million tons. Like, we'd cover Manhattan with it every year. Just physical e-waste with cables and screens and old phones and all that sort of stuff. And now
it's notoriously hard to recycle.
To recycle, right? And information we're in zettabytes. So we've created, more data in the last 2 years than in the last previous history. So one thing I'm noticing, that although the unit cost of digital is very, very energy efficient. There's very little. The smartphone is very energy efficient, and the modern laptop is quite energy efficient. It's just there's so much of them. We are now creating 8K files that nobody can see. We're creating this world of waste where digital could be so much better if we thought about it a bit more, and we're more conscious of the environmental impact. Digital could be this fabulous supporter of improving climate change, yet because our habits are so wasteful, I think, that we never think about the environmental impact of our digital behaviors. Am I being crazy, or is that something that has a kind of triggered some thoughts in your head?
I mean, it has, because you just see it more and more. You see, from my perspective, I see things that are just like, it's starting to be taken for granted that every commit that I push to the world is like forever saved, which to me is like a new concept. Like, I guess in my comeuppance as a developer, I was kind of like, oh, you push up files and you change them. So that's just change, and I have so much disk space, and that's a finite resource, and I change the files on there. But now it's like, if I open a photo and edit it, well, that photo exists, but the photo before I edit it exists too. And if I edit it 10 times, then I have 10 copies of that photo. And that became possible. It just, the reason we did that is because it just became possible to do so. And so we did it. It's just, that was the force was, it's possible, so let's do it. And now that's manifesting over and over. Like the fact that a Zoom call, for example, can just trivially, you click a checkbox and now it's stored forever. That's wild. And they do it because it's a feature, maybe that appeals to some companies, so that they'll pay a few bucks for that because that's important to them. And hey, cloud storage is cheap enough to do it, so they do it. But I don't know. I don't have data and information to find out what it seems like. This is just ballooning, and that the countrysides will be filled with data centers.
It is.
Yeah.
It's ballooning, Chris. Like, as I said, in the last 2 years, we have created more data than in all of previous history.
Does that point to, tearing down a farm to put up a data center? Are we there? Is it pretty soon?
We're beginning to get to points of, like, right now we're into zettabytes, right, of data. And I was calculating how much, if we printed out a zettabyte, how much would a zettabyte, in a typical, if a zettabyte was turned into data and it was printed out, well, I calculated that to print out 1 zettabyte would require 20 trillion trees. So right now on the planet, there's 3 trillion trees. So the total number of trees on the planet is 20 trillion trees, or is 3 trillion. It would require 20 trillion to print out a zettabyte. And by 2030 or so, it's estimated we'll have over 2,000 zettabytes of data. So we are getting to data levels that are, and it is those things, and 90% of it is crap. It's that 90% of data is never accessed 3 months after it was created.
Mm-hmm. Well, the technology of this stuff matters. Not to downplay that, because that's an incredibly big deal. But if technology somehow gets really fancy and you can start storing a zettabyte on a diamond or something, then it's kind of like, I guess it didn't matter then. Like, we found a way to store it that was low energy, and so hopefully that catches up. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and some of it is catching up, but I think that's in a way the problem, because it's never zero energy. So even though, of course, a megabyte of data back in 1967 would have cost you $1 million.
Right.
And so the storage costs have come down enormously, but in many ways they've just facilitated bad habits in doing things to think, it's cheap, and this stuff does exist in data centers. These data centers do have 1 million computers in them. And, think about what's going to happen if we store this for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I mean, these systems will not even last. So while the costs have come down, they are never going to get to zero.
Yeah, things have a way of not working out how you want them to, right? Like safety doesn't get better, performance isn't getting better, accessibility isn't getting better. What would make us think that this would get any better either? Things have a kind of a gnarly way of not working out how you want them to.
Yeah, and this sense of that thinking about I was looking at in the podcasting, and we were saying, well, what's the best way to save this and to edit it? And of course, if you know a musical background, you say, let's do it in a WAV format. So we'll edit in a WAV format and we'll save to MP3. So, but then I started doing a little reading about it, and I was saying, well, professional journalists out on the road are recording in MP3 and editing, and their editors are editing in MP3. And I was thinking, but you're going to lose a bit of quality, aren't you? Going to lose, isn't that? So I decided to do an experiment, and I recorded the same thing in a WAV, and I recorded it then in MP3. Just 30 seconds of speech or whatever. And then I edited the WAV in using WAV, and then I saved it to MP3. And I edited the MP3 in MP3, and I saved it to MP3. And then I asked a bunch of people, I said, can you hear any difference? So I gave them 2 files. And people came back and nobody could hear a difference. And I said, one guy came back to me and he says, and I listened to it on really expensive headphones. He was an audio geek. And he says, I can't hear any difference. So then I says, well, why do we edit in MP3 if it's only a podcast then? If you're only dealing, because a WAV is like 10 times heavier. And do you see what I'm getting at? The kind of the consciousness of, we don't choose the lightest option. We often overdo it. Yeah, just in case you need to go. Yeah, I know MP3 is just as good as WAV, but I'm still going to do it in WAV.
Yeah. I know what you mean there. I don't even know what to say. It'd be interesting to hear what somebody like from the Internet Archive has to say. Like, would they say like, no, the WAV is important because X, Y, and Z, or would they say, oh no, absolutely, save the MP3? You wonder.
Yeah, if there was a reason, if you had I totally agree with that. But does the archive need to archive the 40 edits you did to that photo?
Yeah, right. That's the point. Can we evolve our thinking to be more intelligent about what to kind of carve away from the back?
We don't ask those questions, do we? What is useful? What should we store? Because when we store everything, it'll be incredibly hard to find anything.
It's funny that if you made your life's work getting people to go back through their archives and do what you did, you make some impact, Or if you convinced Microsoft to take one tiny little look at some server in a closet, it'd probably have 10x the impact, because they probably have some computer somewhere that has server logs from 2004 on it that are terabytes, jillions of terabytes big. It's funny that, I don't know, it's like, again, not trying to like discount any particular effort here, but it's like you get the most bang for your buck when it's done at scale, when it's like.
If digital was a house, we'd live in one room. It would be a 16-room house. We'd live in one room, and the other 15 rooms would be stuffed to the gills of stuff we'll never use. And then every year we get 2 more rooms that are stuffed to the gill with stuff we never use.
It would be, yeah. I mean, that's a pretty apt metaphor for digital right now, I think. And the trend points the wrong way, right? That storage is going to continue to get cheaper cloud services are going to continue to get better and faster and more affordable, and more people will have access to them. It's unfortunate, but it seems like the trend is pointing the wrong way, in a way that it's
I read one study which says it is 3,000 times more energy efficient to store locally than to store to the cloud. Most of us are becoming much more conscious about our physical footprint, but we still have not a kind of opened up that consciousness of our digital footprint.
Right. Yeah, the developer in me thinks about some other possibilities too. Like, what do you have that requires like an active server? Something that needs to be like hooked up to the actual internet and responding to requests and is like awake. That's kind of has different energy requirements than a server that's just more dormant. That's just full of static files. That's just kind of sitting there. That the kind of type of storage is probably important to consider too. Here's a related concept. Amazon AWS, right? Depending on how you measure it, it's, some people say some half of the internet has something to do with AWS. It's a massive chunk of the internet. Well, it's interesting to find things that are, up this line of thinking that that benefit them as well as us. It's like, if it's nice if there's business incentive to make things cheaper. I mean, they do. Here's just one interesting thing that they do. Not to like, I don't know enough to sing the praises of any particular company in this, so don't take this as that, but I just find this interesting. Amazon AWS has this product called EC2, and EC2 is what you just buy to just spin up a regular web server. So if you wanted to host your website on it, you could, and you'd go to their EC2 service and you'd say, I want this kind of computer with this kind of stuff on it. Please spin it up for me. And they'll say, well, you can do that and we'll charge you X dollars a month for it. Or if you buy it for a whole year, we'll give you some percentage off. That's fine. And a lot of companies do that because when you do that, you're guaranteed to have this computer on as long as you're paying for it. It is spun up computer ready to go. It is yours. You bought this computer in the sky. And that's great. And a lot of companies do that because they want the satisfaction. They want to know that computer that they paid for is ready to go at any given time. But it turns out that a lot of companies just aren't using the ones that they bought. They're ready to go all the time, but they're just not being used. So wasted electricity, right? Well, interestingly, Amazon resells those, almost like an airline kind of selling too many seats for an airline. They'll kind of secretly sell you this thing called EC2 spot instances, which are 90% off price-wise, discounted. But the caveat is that the rug can be ripped out from under them at any given time. Like, you could be using this computer and they just take it because the company that originally bought it is now using it again. So you can't run your thing anymore. So that sounds scary and dangerous. But you can architect your app to be ready for those rugs to be pulled out. You can use it for things that aren't particularly mission critical, which is more and more stuff in digital these days, which is kind of interesting. So I don't know how, what the economic impact of that is, or the, long-term energy usage and stuff. It's more like just a smart business move by them. But I think it makes sense. So they don't have to spin up as many computers, because they're making sure that the computers that they have spun up are being used by as many people as you can by discounting them in that way. So just a, interesting tidbit, hopefully that's why I like tackling it from both sides. It's one thing for a company to be smart enough and say, hey, we're going to spin this one down. Like, it's like going through your attic and cleaning stuff out, or your archives like you were. That's a good approach. But I'm almost more attracted to approaches where it's somehow automated, like the company itself is like, I know you're not using this, so I'm going to let somebody else use it. Like that probably has a bigger impact in the end.
Just finishing off, is there anything that really, in this crazy moment that we're in, that, that has struck you and said, well, in a professional, in lots of things in our personal lives, that said, I need to think differently about this, or this has changed my view of development, or if it hasn't at all, but anything that really has said, wow, I need to think differently about it. This has really changed, at least challenged a perspective or shifted a perspective.
How fragile the world is in a way, to see, what's essentially been a couple of weeks now of the, it's months, but depending on where you live, the impact feels different. The timeline plays out a little differently. To me, it feels just like it's just been a few weeks to watch, even in my local area, the unemployment rate skyrocket and businesses closing and incredible number of people getting laid off, an incredible number of people on unemployment that fast. Like, wow, what a fragile place we live in. It makes me want to be like, I just want to make choices that, make me less fragile, but I want to help the world be less fragile. You talked about forces earlier, like what is causing it to be this way. That played out to this is even more interesting to me, because it feels like the easy answer is, or like if you're mad on Twitter, you're going to be like, eat the rich. This is about rich people being greedy assholes. And maybe it is, but is it that simple? Is it that there's a couple of people in white towers and they're assholes and that's why the world is bad? It just doesn't seem right. It seems like there's got to be something else going on here. There's bigger factors at play.
If you're interested in these sorts of ideas, I've published a book called Worldwide Waste. You can find out more at gerrymcgovern.com/www. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you'd like to be part of the conversational community, hop on over to thisishcd.com, where you can join the Slack community and help shape future episodes and connect with other designers around the world. Or join the HCD newsletter, where you can win books and get updates. Subscribe to our content on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And listen to any of our design podcasts, such as Getting Started in Design, Bringing Design Closer with Gerry Scullion, Prod Pod with Adrian Tan, and Ethnopod with Joe Hasbrook. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.